Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow. With me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, we've got a packed show this evening. We've got a fantastic guest coming up at 7:30. It's the one and only Liz Phillips, whom you will remember from a few weeks ago when she's the organiser of the Great Resist Conference, which was held on the 24th of June down in Newport in South Wales. She's coming back on to tell us about how that went. She's also a former PA of Nigel Farage, no less, and we're going to be talking about the debanking debacle that has been going on and that is shaping up to affect us all at the end of the day. So that's going to be a really good conversation that we're going to have with Liz Phillips at the bottom of the hour. We're also going to be talking about what's going on, of course, here in Scotland and throughout Britain politically. So please do send in your comments, please do send in your greetings, and please do tell us what is on your mind and what you think of what's happening at the moment. And on TikTok, please do also send in your messages on TikTok and tell us what great Unionists you are and tell us what you think of what's happening and what you think of Margaret Ferrier, who we'll begin our programme with. But before we do that, let's say hello to a few people, and quite a few comments have come in already. And it was Derek who was first in the house saying, "It was great seeing everyone at the street stall last Saturday," and we're going to talk about that. We've got some pictures on that as well. We had a street stall in Argyle Street, and what a great turnout it was, as Derek says. Hello to Debbie from Cummonston, I got it right tonight, and to Nigel. Evening all, looking forward to a great show. Good to have you in the house, Nigel. And to Harry as well. Good evening, AFFG and Unionists everywhere. How are you all today? Well, we're enjoying the monsoon season here in Glasgow, otherwise known as July and August. Hey to Melissa and to Catherine also, and to Christopher. Good evening, Alistair, and a wonderful and a worldwide British evening to all. And to Stuart from Elgin. Hope you're well, Stuart. And TC, nice to see TC in the house. Good evening to Unionists everywhere. Well, I was going to start with Margaret Ferrier, but let's start with some happier and more colourful news about our street stall that we had. We have had, well, it was actually our second street stall in July. We had it in Argyle Street on Saturday, and it was an extremely windy day, so that was great for our flags, but we really needed all five of us just to hold the table down sometimes. But it all adds up to the fun. We got some photographs here which we'll go through just to show what a fantastic team we are. You won't see the photographs if you're on TikTok. You need to go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. But there was five of us. But I like that photo because we're all together there with that nice blue colour of our Unionist t-shirts that say Scottish and British. And you can see what a lovely clear day, or lovely bright day it was. Okay. Moving on, there we go. Lots of people coming up, really just to say how pleased they were to see us. And one of the things one of the real benefits of doing our street stall is simply keeping up morale, keeping the British end up, just enabling people to see that we're out there, that that we are the majority, and that we're happy to be seen as such an important thing that we do. Okay. There's another person signing one of our petitions as well, and the chap at the back there, he's holding the flag and the table down so the table doesn't blow away. Okay. There we go, little crowd. The guy there on the right, he's holding our 6-meter flagpole, which was creating somewhat of a stir. A couple of people asked us where they could get the flag, which was one of our coronation flags of King Charles. Okay. We group around the table there, signing petitions, taking some of our free literature. Okay. There we go. The stall was busy all the time, basically, all the time. Okay. I like that photograph. That's a good one. Now, later in the program, no doubt you'll find the links to the shop that we sell these hoodies and those T-shirts. You'll find the link in the threads. Okay. That's a good shot. That's going in the magazine, definitely. Okay. A couple of T-shirts there. 100% British and truly proud of it, says that T-shirt. Okay. And there you go. One of our colourful flags flying in the wind, caught at quite an interesting angle there. I like the saturation in that picture. It's a good one. Okay. And this was also what we were doing. We had our film team in Ayr to capture the march of the Scottish nationalists who were having a separatist shuffle, or a wobble through the streets of Ayr to the unfortunate denizens of Ayr, who happened to be out trying to enjoy the day. But unfortunately this group was stinking up the great outdoors, as they say, with their Scottish nationalist banners as they traipsed through the streets. And that guy there in his wee mobile scooter is pulling a speaker, blasting out tunes behind him. I don't know how you would get around the corners on that sort of thing. I don't know if it would corner too well, but at least we didn't hear of any accidents happening as a consequence of that. But what we did do is we counted them, of course. We filmed them in order to count them, and there's 660 of them, as you'll be able to count approximately for yourself on our YouTube page. And the video on our YouTube page of their march has got 1,200 views, and the information that we put out on Twitter has got over 16,000 views as well. And so it was definitely worth our while to get down there to Ayr and to film them, just to expose their lies, because they'd pretended there was 2,000 of them, which of course there was not. Nothing close to that. Now, there was another group of people. They weren't connected with the Force for Good, but I was glad to see them out, and they were down at the bottom of the High Street. Okay, which you'll see here in the next photograph. And I think that was a local band, perhaps, that were out. I don't know who they were, but I'm glad they were. There was about 10 of them, and they were at the bottom of the High Street waving their flags. So it's good to see people doing that sort of independent work, just to remind the Scottish nationalists that they live in our wonderful United Kingdom. Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. So that was a busy weekend that we had. We were in two places at once. Our film crew was in Ayr, and our table team were having a Coronation Street stall in Argyle Street, folks. So good stuff. We continue to be out. We continue to be Scotland's premier pro-UK street campaigning organisation, something we've built up now in 11 and a half years of action. So if you like what we do, you know to give us the thumbs up for that. Indeed, what an embarrassment they were, says Stuart. Derek says, more like The Walking Dead on parade. They certainly were, and we weren't there to do any kind of counter presence as such. We were just quietly filming them just to reveal their lies. Hey, hello to Ron, who's given us a shout out from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Fantastic, Ron. Thanks for dropping in. Hope all's well in Milwaukee. What made Milwaukee famous has made a loser out of me, as Jerry Lee Lewis used to sing. Milwaukee, home of the Fawns, one of our personal heroes. Stephen says it's vital that we keep the flag flying in support for the United Kingdom. It reassures everyone who supports the Union that they are not forgotten. It does. It maintains morale. It helps to promote a Force for Goods brand. It helps to increase the visibility of British symbolism in Scotland, which is what you're getting at there, Stephen, so that people can see that we exist. It enables us at A Force for Good to promote our message through the printed word and through the spoken word when we meet people. It enables us to acquire sign-ups. We do raise some money from donations which are made in our bucket, and it provides photographs and materials for our social media, and it helps our activists to learn how best to engage with the great British public. So there's lots of advantages of doing the activism on a regular basis, and we know all the tricks now. We're always learning, of course. Every time we go out we're learning, but it really does help. It really does help us, and helps train, as it were, all of us in how best to get the message over. Let's talk about Margaret Ferrier very quickly. She was the SNP MP who got a petition launched against her, and the recall petitions are a relatively new thing in the British Constitution, but if 10% of your constituency's voters sign a petition, then you have to have a by-election, and you don't sign it online. You have to go to an actual signing place to sign a petition against your MP, and 10% of Rutherglen's constituency would have been 8,113 people. But in the event, they got 11,896 people to sign it, which was approximately 15% of the overall electorate of that particular constituency, which is called Rutherglen and Hamilton West. And so that means that there's going to be a by-election. Now, when that by-election will be, it's not entirely clear, but it's expected sometime in October, I should say. It'll be a Thursday. The by-election would be staged likely either October the 5th or October the 12th, and an SNP defeat would of course give Yusuf a massive headache, and it would be very good for Keir Starmer. And it looks like Labour may in fact be the people who will win it. But of course nothing is certain in politics, so we don't really know about that yet. Now, in that regard, Catherine says, I'm wanting to say we want rid of the SNP. Looks like Scotland will vote for Labour, although Catherine said I'd vote for the British Unionist Party if they were standing in my area. we do need reassurance on what Labour are proposing. Well, absolutely, because we know Labour are proposing some serious constitutional changes, which in the normal habit of Labour will do absolutely nothing to strengthen the Union and everything to strengthen Scottish separatism. So we do need to think about that also, and we do need reassurance on what they're proposing as far as devolution is concerned. I'd like them just to leave devolution alone, but of course Gordon Brown has his fingerprints all over Labour in Scotland, and Gordon Brown's long-term ambition has been to turn the United Kingdom into a federal state, and he's constantly pushing that, and we've got documents here in the office going back 10-15 years of Gordon Brown pushing stuff that he's still pushing today. So we'll just have to see, and we'll be at the forefront of exposing whatever it is that they're coming out with and advising them nicely not to do those things, because it would be an absolute foolish task. Now, Britain here. Hello, Britain. You say the SNP say they hate London rule, but they would rather be ruled by Brussels. Well, isn't that so true? And they look on Brussels as their ally because they see it as Britain's enemy. Britain says, we'll make sure the Union flag flies over Edinburgh Castle. I guess you're from Edinburgh then, Mr. Britain. Stephen says it's a shame that Margaret Ferrier lasted so long. She still claimed a salary and expenses. What she did by breaking the rules was unforgivable. Well, especially when she's making the rules, whether you agree with the rules or not, if you're the person that's making the rules and you're voting for the rules, but you still break the rules, then that really does, that's not a good thing to do. That's very bad. And that's the situation that she got herself into. Alan says it shows the kind of person she is, that she hung on so long and waited to be embarrassed by the recall rather than stepping down. Well, I suppose a little thing called your weekly wage, which is massive, had a say in her decision there, because it's not as if she's going to be able to find another job that's going to pay her £86,000 a year. Goodness me, yeah. Well, and talking about the absolutely crazy things that are going on, and talking about Westminster, we've got this situation here where this week the Green Party, the Green Goblins, Patrick Harmful has said that Scots face ban on selling homes unless they install heat pumps. Now, this is just another wacky green idea that unless you have an actual heat pump installed in your house, you're potentially not going to be able to sell your house until you install one. Just part of the overall green agenda to make everybody colder and hungrier in life. And you look at that and you think that surely can't come to pass, because firstly, heat pumps are not efficient. They might work if you lived in the middle of the Nevada desert, or perhaps in the Sahara Desert or something like that. But if you're a Bedouin, or if you're at that festival that they have in the Nevada desert, you don't need heat pumps. You don't need heat at all anytime during the entire year. But here in Scotland, you're going to need it basically 6 months of the year, if not 9 months of the year. And especially during the coldest times, the idea of the heat pump is it extracts alleged heat from the ground. Well, if the ground is like frozen, how much heat and how deep do you have to go before you can extract any heat from the ground? And then you've got to then process it into a kind of heat that you can put around your building. So the whole thing is like totally crazy. It might work in some areas and some places at some time of the year, but Scotland's really one of the last places on earth where you would want to really trial that, and especially you would not want to make it an actual law. So this is going to be another green disaster, and we have to hope, if such a terrible thing ever came to pass, that the British government, if there was still such a thing left and Gordon Brown hadn't dissolved it to absolute weakness, we'd like to think that it would step in and stop all of that, just like it stepped in and stopped the GRR carry on, just like it stepped in and stopped the deposit return scheme. We have to hope and pray that if this was ever to come to pass, there'd still be a British government with enough character and with enough moral stamina to actually stop that happening. That would be our only hope, and that's why we do need a central government at times, in order to prevent the madness that some of these devolved institutions can come up with. So thank goodness that we've at least still got the we've still got a unitary state. We're still living in a unitary state where Westminster is theoretically always sovereign, and practically sometimes it has to demonstrate that. Thank goodness that that's still around, because we're going to need them again. We're going to need them again. We're going to need them every year to step in. And of course, talking about stepping in, Yusuf's independent study is irresponsible, said the Scottish Secretary, Alistair Jack. And he wrote Humza Yousaf a wee letter to tell him how irresponsible he was to spend the money, British taxpayers' money, on promoting separatist literature, separatist research and literature and documents and videos and so on and so forth. Well, of course, Humza Yousaf's going to read that letter and throw it in the bin, which of course is what he absolutely did, because Humza Yousaf, as we've said a lot of times, is, under the present law, within his jurisdiction to command the civil service in Edinburgh to follow his every diktat. And that's not going to change until the law changes. Until the law changes and the law stops. The law stops British taxpayers' money being used to break up Britain. And I want to just talk about that, because last time we were on, I showed a wee video about the man who's in charge of the civil service, which is a chap called Simon Case. He's a cabinet minister. He's called the Cabinet Secretary, and he's in charge of the British civil service, of which the branch in Edinburgh is part. And it's Simon Case and his buddies who sit around that cabinet table who have the power to make the new law and get it through Parliament. And they've been sniffing about and complaining recently about it. And when Simon Case was asked about this by Lord Keane in the video that we showed a couple of weeks ago, it was Simon Case's main concern to ensure the quote-unquote impartiality of the civil service. He said, "I will consult with the Civil Service Commission about it, because, to come back to the rather important point that flows through all this, we all want to protect the integrity and impartiality of our civil service." Well, yeah, the impartiality and integrity of the civil service is an issue, I suppose, and if it can be shown that the civil service was actually siding with and being impartial because they all supported the SNP, then of course that would be a big issue that needed to be looked at. But that's not actually the main issue that runs through all of this, Mr. Case. The main issue that runs through all of this is UK taxpayers' money being spent to break up the United Kingdom. That's the first issue. The second issue is UK taxpayers' money being spent on a reserved matter anyway, because the Constitution and the Union is reserved. So these are two big political and ethical matters that need to be addressed, and have only become issues since the SNP took power in 2007, because hitherto that year there had never been a political party running a particular part of the United Kingdom that wanted to break up the United Kingdom. So it was only in 2007 when this issue arose. And of course, all the governments ever since then just ran away from it, because they did not have the cojones to engage, to enjoin the fight, to stand up for the United Kingdom. And I was thinking about this the other day, because for some reason a phrase came back to my mind, and it was back on the 9th of November 1990. In literally the dying days of the Margaret Thatcher administration, when the Secretary for Northern Ireland at the time, who was a man called Peterborough, he came out and said something so incredibly unpatriotic and indeed traitorous. He said, quote, that the British government has no selfish, strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland. And that was 19 days before the Thatcher premiership ended and John Major took over. But think about that. No selfish, strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland, which is to say no selfish, strategic or economic interest in maintaining the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And so I wondered to what extent that was actually, that's something that we should always remember. I mean, does the British government take that attitude towards Scotland today? I'd like to think that it doesn't, but sometimes you could be forgiven for thinking that it takes that attitude, because since 2007, successive British governments have done sweet nothing to stop our taxpayers' money being used deliberately to break up our United Kingdom. So if they're doing nothing about it, you have to wonder, is it because they literally have no selfish, strategic or economic interest to do anything about it? And one shies away from coming to those conclusions, but the logic is pretty clear in many cases. Now, I know what civil servants and politicians also do as well, is they hide behind this word impartiality, because if you can look at a situation like we've got here in Scotland and go, well, we're going to be impartial about it, what that means is, I'm not going to get into a fight about this. I'm just going to sit on the fence and claim impartiality, claim that this is the moral thing to do. We've got no selfish interest. We've got no economic interest on this. We'll just be impartial, and we'll just sit on the fence and watch it all unfold. And so politicians and civil servants, they always do plead this impartiality because they simply don't want to get into a fight about stuff. And so let's also remember that, but let's encourage them to get into a fight about this. And it's very easily done, and all you need to do is stand up for the United Kingdom, and you need to bring in a new law. And as we always say, we've written the law, a law to stop the civil service pushing the indie agenda, and it's here on page 13 of Do More Together, which is our magazine that you'll find. "40-page magazine, 102 policies to keep the UK together." It's all in there. Great stuff. Now, in a couple of minutes, we're going to bring on Liz Phillips, the organiser of the Great Resist Conference. But before we do that, we've got On This Day in British History. And afterwards, I'll ask a question about it, and the winner will get this little Union Jack wallet to put in your travel cards, your bus passes, your railway passes, whatever. And also got a little credit card wallet all on its own as well, which can go into your wallet also, with the Union Jack designs. Great. So on this day in British history was the death of the man who, Scotsman, needless to say, who invented the telephone. So we've got a lot to thank him for. He was, of course, Alexander Graham Bell. And the telephone patent which he created wasn't really his big thing. His big thing was the fact that he was actually a teacher of the deaf. And he was born in Edinburgh on the 3rd of March in 1847, and his name was simply Alexander Bell, but everybody else seemed to have a middle name, so he asked his dad to give him a middle name, and his dad gave him the name Graham as the middle name because that happened to be the name of the lodger who was staying with them at the time. So, but Bell's father and his grandfather and his brother had all been associated with work on elocution and speech, and his mother and his wife were deaf, and so that influenced his life. So the whole concept of listening and hearing was a big part, and speaking as well was a big part of his life, which led him to experiment with hearing devices, which resulted in him being awarded a patent for the telephone in 1876, and he's gone down as the inventor of the telephone. And I know other people have tried to claim that mantle, but as far as we're concerned, it's obviously Alexander Graham Bell's the man for that. And he, interestingly, didn't like having a telephone in his office because he thought it was an intrusion into his work. And we've got a picture here of Alexander Graham Bell's work at his deaf school in Boston. And that's Alexander Graham Bell at the top on the right of the picture with the dark beard. And that's his school for deaf mutes. And that picture was taken in 1871. And that's all the children there nicely turned out. And there's a wee girl up there in the top left with a bonnet on looking out the window. That's a charming photograph of Alexander Graham Bell and his school there for deaf mutes. So he passed away on this day, 2nd of August in 1922, aged 75. A great chap. Okay, I'll ask a question on that in a couple of minutes. There we go. Jordan Penn says, I live near Brantford, Ontario, where Alexander Bell said he invented the telephone. Very good. Very good. Now, folks, it's my delight to welcome for the second time on the show Liz Phillips, who is a former personal assistant of Nigel Farage when he was a member of the European Parliament, and she was also the organiser of the Great Resist, which was a conference held in Newport, South Wales, back on Saturday the 24th of June. So please say hello to Liz. Please send in your comments and your greetings as well. Hello there, Liz.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm extremely well, thank you, Alistair, and it's great to see you, and it's great to listen. Every time I come onto your show, or every time I listen to your show, I always learn something, and I had no idea that Alexander Graham Bell was so involved with the deaf, and I think it's a part of society that even to this day is sadly pushed to one side. And it was great to hear that a good Scotsman didn't only invent the telephone but worked so hard with people with a disability, which is wonderful.
Absolutely a tremendous chap all round. Yes. Well, last time we spoke, it was a few days before you were going to have your big conference in Newport, and I had not been able to get down to that because we had our event outside the SNP conference on the same day, where they were having their conference, their hopeless conference, to try to figure out what to do next year. And we made a bit of a scene outside that, and then we had a street stall during the day. But how did it go at the end of the day? Was there a good turnout?
We were full. You have to smile when you do something new, Alistair. I don't know about you. you're always a bit nervous about how things are going to go. And I've got wonderful speakers, yourself included. You very kindly did an interview with me, which we played on the day, alongside Jason Lloyd Davis in Wales and David Vance from Northern Ireland, about keeping the UK together. We put all three of you together. David Vance also we did by an interview. Jason was there on the day in Wales, but we had a full house. Now, I hadn't looked at the sale of tickets because I thought we were going to either have, sort of 10 and I would just die. So I didn't dare look. We had an absolute full house from all over the country came. It was absolutely incredible. And we kept strictly to time. So we started dead on the dot of 12 o'clock and we finished dead on the dot of 6 with an hour's break in the middle so that delegates could get to the speakers and chat to them. And the atmosphere was so electric, it was so charged, so positive. I came away, I was just absolutely blown. And we've got a second conference now on the 2nd of September in Peterborough, in the Holiday Inn Hotel in Peterborough, again 12 till 6. We've got a change of speakers this time, and to get every subject in that we need to talk about, because we are the great resist. So it's all the subjects that everybody's talking about, Alistair, that we need to have experts in, local experts, and also household names. So we've got a great mixture, and that's the 2nd of September. And then we'll have a third one on the 11th of November, Armistice Day in Manchester. So we're gradually moving up. So look out, Scotland, we're on our way. Okay. So 11th of November will be in Manchester. We haven't got a venue for that yet, but the 2nd of September we have. So it's a £5 entry, and just everybody that's listening come. But we had such a wonderful array of speakers that did everything from the fourth industrial revolution to climate change, to keep it cash, freedom of speech, the importance of individuals in the fight. That was Richard Vobes. Now, Richard, like you, gave an interview over beforehand. He couldn't be there on the day. He's going to be there in person. And we had Godfrey Bloom, The Dangers of Central Digital Currency. Now, that's something that everybody is looking at. The age of the central bank digital currency is on its way. And we just had wonderful, wonderful speakers. Neil McRae, who is a doctor. We had a student, James Harvey, Students Against Tyranny, because these poor students in all these colleges, etc., are having such a rough time. If they go against the grain of they're not woke, they're having a terrible, terrible time. So, we had James Harvey, wonderful young man. And then we had the great Kimberly Isherwood, who is Public Child Protection Wales. And you can all see what's happening in schools with the education of children, particularly on the sex and relationships education. It is grotesque, Alistair, and the government are against her. Now, you'd think that the government, if you're trying to protect children, would be on your side. So there's something very sinister going on. So we had the great Kimberly Isherwood. All of these things can be found on our websites and what have you. All the speeches, they were great. And we're looking forward to a great day again on the 2nd of September.
Great. Well, just give us your website address. Do you have it offhand?
Yes. We'll put it. All the interviews, the full interviews, are up on www.freedomdigitalbroadcasting.tv.
Right.
And the previews are all up on the things like YouTube, etc. YouTube, Rumble, Getter. So you can find them anywhere, Alistair. And of course, the Great Resist is www.thegreatresist.net. Okay, and that website is still under construction as we speak, because it's a one-stop shop. So not only can you look at the resistance that we're all producing, but you can also look for the Trilateral Commission, the Illuminati, the World Economic Forum, and all the things that are going on that they're advocating they're going to do.
So that's very helpful. So is that correct? Freedom Digital
Digitalbroadcasting.tv.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. And
This
thegreatresist.net.
.net. That's
Yeah,
wonderful. You're
good.
a lot better at technology than me.
We've had a wee bit of practice. This is our 70th
Is it really?
Good Evening Britain show.
Gosh.
We've this is our third version of shows. We had back during the COVID time, we called it Saturday Street Stall, because none of us could get out the house, so we could, of course, but we weren't allowed to actually have a street stall, is what I meant. So that's when we got into doing a weekly show.
That's great.
Our Saturday Street Stall. And then in 2021 we had a Good Morning Britain, Good Morning UK, Have Your Say, in order to try to rival the absolute rubbish coming out from Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, which was just terrible, depressing, anti-human stuff, really. So we tried to perk things up with a morning show. And
he's changed his tune, hasn't he?
He has, absolutely. But some of us don't forget. We're not going to forget what he and others were saying at the time, and they can't escape it.
I'm afraid one Scotsman called Andrew Neil was as bad.
I was just going to say his article. In fact, we've got his article here in the office, filed specially. So he can't escape what he said about the rest of us, which was absolutely terrible and frightening. I mean, that was a wake-up call for many of us when we saw the extent to which these figures of authority were actually against so many of us.
But Alistair, I don't know whether you find this the same as me. Can you explain how these people, you and I, perhaps aren't on the forefront, as people would say, but we can read, we can look, we can see, we can make decisions, we can look at two sides of an argument and make our own decision. How come these people have forgotten how to read and look at two sides of a coin?
Well, exactly. And it's very difficult to explain that other than saying that they have some deliberate agenda. Because if they were just like you and I, they could have that particular opinion. But back then, they had an agenda. They weren't interested in it. And I noticed that today as well. I was catching up on some reading, and OfCom guidelines state that because the national newspaper, which is the Scottish National newspaper, is very intolerant of views that it doesn't like, and it always wonders why GB News continues to be allowed to say things about climate change. And so they're always wanting to complain to Ofcom about GB News and things like that.
Could I just tell you about climate change? For the last 2 weeks in July and the first 2 or 3 days in August, the reason why my cheeks are slightly red this evening is because we've got a big log fire going. It's so cold, wet and miserable down here, and we've had a fire going each evening. Now, I realise we're not supposed to have log fires because that's totally against Just Stop Oil and who all these people are, etc. But we've had to have a fire going. It's really cold. And this is the heat wave that they predicted we were going to be burnt out this summer, I think.
Yes, they've weaponized the weather, as they say, just like they weaponized the common cold. They weaponized breathing next. They already weaponized eating to a certain extent as well, which some things you're meant to not eat. But basically, the Ofcom guidelines saying here that the scientific principles behind global warming are broadly settled and not an issue of political controversy. We do, though, distinguish between the scientific principles and discussions of the public policy responses to climate change. So basically, you've got to accept that it's a real thing, but we're prepared to allow debate on how best to respond to it, is essentially the OfCom position, which, as you know, nothing is settled in life, whether scientifically or politically or in any other matter. These things are always constantly debatable. But
a similar news station to our own, Alistair, to yours and mine, put out 31 climate change myths debunked, where the end of the world was coming. By 2020, we were supposed to sail over the Arctic Circle because there would be no ice left. And the polar bears were disintegrating, their numbers were disintegrating. Now they're having to cull polar bears because they've, got too many, etc. So, the whole thing is just one huge scam.
Absolutely, it's completely mental. And how can the ice melt when for half the year it's in pitch black? I don't know how long it's in pitch black, but down there in the Antarctic it's dark for months. So there's literally no sun. So how can any of that ever melt? It's never going to melt unless you literally move the sun's orbit. So just before we go into talking actually about digital currencies and debanking, let me just ask the question for the viewers tonight who want to win the prize. Alexander Graham Bell is responsible for the invention of which household item? That's an easy one. Please do send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person in there will win this, as well as a little credit card wallet, and we'll get that sent off to you tomorrow. So send in your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk, folks. Good. Now, I don't think you mind me saying, you used to be the PA for Nigel, and Nigel's been in the news a lot, especially recently with the incredible debanking that he suffered. And we had heard in the past of people being debanked, but we hadn't ever, it hadn't ever been really made the news. But it was one of these things that was bubbling under there, especially during COVID when they debanked the Canadian truckers, and when the British government said nothing about that. That was a big wake-up call as well, because Boris Johnson didn't say to Trudeau, wait a minute, you shouldn't do that. That's not part of our Western tradition. That's not what the Kanzuk countries should be doing. That's not an Anglo value for the Anglosphere. That's not an Anglosphere value. He didn't come out with any of that. He just simply kept his head down and said nothing. So at that point I realised, crikey, they support debanking. So I don't know if you have had any thoughts on this, or if you have any information that you'd like to share with us on this serious matter.
Where would you like to start? We'll start with a smile. Yes, I work for Nigel. I did all his the work that I did for him was the correspondence side, and looked after literally all of the written work, if you like, for him on that side. And I had a wonderful time working for him. The problem is, Alistair, that the Nigel that is reported on by the mainstream media, this hate figure, is one of the kindest men I've ever worked for. And, I worked for him. I used to be in the office just after 7:30 in the morning. And he used to come in, having done a couple of early morning shows on the television. I've been literally bitten to smithereens, if you like, by this awful mainstream media of ours. And, he put up with so much. And he used to come in, as I say, was one of the kindest people I've ever worked for. And to see him pilloried like I have to watch, other people are the same. People like Tommy Robinson, another hero in my eyes, Katie Hopkins, all these people who stand up, put their heads above the parapet, and you get this awful left-wing press. I don't know how we've managed to get them all down in our half of the world, Alistair, thinking of shipping them back over the border and shutting it. That's any help. But I'm sure you don't want them any more than we do. But, they really are dreadful. And the things that have been said about Nigel are just totally 100% untrue. So there he is, debanked. Now, like many people, Alistair, it's almost, you're ashamed, I think is the word. If you're debanked, you feel shame. You feel you've done something. and you don't want to talk about it. And Nigel was like this. He's actually said so on a number of occasions. But he hadn't realised that so many other people, and the whole agenda is to get rid of small businesses. Now, I'm not saying Nigel's was a small business, he was just a thorn in everybody's side because of what he stood for. But small businesses are their bank accounts are being closed at the rate of 1,000 per day at the moment. Now, that is because big business wants to take over. And if you look at everything from the UN, from the World Economic Forum, the Trilateral Commission, all it is talking about is big business. You'll get everything delivered to your door, that which you are allowed to buy, of course. So all small businesses, they want to get rid of them. And that's really what it's all about. And this is the bit that people have forgotten when they're talking about Nigel and bank accounts being closed. It is a deliberate attempt to get rid of small business. Now, this has all been blown wide open. And I wrote to the CEO of Coots. I don't think it was my letter or that of Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey's was a lot shorter than mine, but very much to the point. He's a Yorkshireman who doesn't waste his words, and told the gentleman to fall on his sword, like any proper gentleman should do. I was a little bit more forthcoming than Godfrey, but this is all heading towards central bank digital currency. And if you look at things like patents, you'll see that the Bank of England have taken out a patent so that you get a chip, Alistair, under your four thing here, so that you pay when you go in. You don't need a card, you don't need your telephone. They've got a patent out. This is the Bank of England for a chip to go under your skin. So you just put the chip down. Now, if this isn't about total control, I know people think I've literally grown two horns and a tail, and I'm an absolute conspiracy theorist. Go on and look online. You'll see all the patents that they've taken out. It's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. And there will unfortunately be people who will say that's a good idea because, that's going to be so convenient, without realising that they're just enslaving themselves. And
absolutely.
The government kind of roused itself to say that it was going to do two things in as a consequence of this debanking that's going on. One of which is it's going to extend the notice period for an account closure from 2 months to 3 months to give savers more time to challenge the decision through the Financial Ombudsman Service. So 1 month extension for the execution basically there. And then the second thing that they're doing is banks will have to explain why they're terminating a person's bank account. So while you're 3 months later, while you're actually strapped to the pole, the man will actually read out the charge sheet fully against you. So I don't really think those two things make a dime's bit of difference, really. What's needed, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but I think what's needed is a new law to say that everyone is entitled, certainly every British citizen anyway, should be entitled to a personal bank account. I mean, how difficult would such a law be, and why is that not being brought in? What's your thoughts on that?
Alistair, we used to have, before the post office was privatised, everybody had the right, because of course when the post office was privatised under the wonderful Lib Dem called Sir Vince Cable, who privatised the post office, everybody was entitled to an account, and that was right across the board. There was no question about that. That all changed, of course, when you get private companies. They can do what they like, which is what the banks have done. So there is a move. Nigel is now, as you know, has got a website up for all those people that have lost their bank accounts either privately or through business. And so this is absolutely massive. If you think of 1,000 a day, and you think of the ones that have gone in the past, I mean, I think I'm glad it has happened to him because he has spoken out. But shame in a way that many people didn't speak out a long time ago. This has been going on for about a good 10 years, and a lot of people have been debanked, which is
Yes.
so, it's a long time coming. But there's
Yes.
two things here. One, of course, is the individual. Second is the company. Thirdly, which nobody's mentioning, NatWest have made £3.6 billion in the first 6 months of this year. Now, I'm all for companies making profit. You have to make profit to have your staff. And also, yes, you pay your shareholders. This is obscene. Savers aren't getting the benefits. And you think of the people now that can't afford their mortgages, can't afford their overdrafts, etc., that are being closed down for that reason as well. But they've made £3.6 billion. It is obscene.
Oh, absolutely.
That's 6 months, not a year.
Yes, if you're able to set up a bank, then it is literally a license to print money, quite literally print money, as they say. But you're right about, thankfully, Nigel was debanked in the sense that I couldn't think of a better person to pick up the sword and fight on that particular matter, because household name, with Touchwood, hopefully continue to have a television program reaching every household in Britain's and also got a lot of sympathy from millions and millions of people. So it's so good that he's been able to take up that fight. But as you say, this has been happening for years, because I remember when Tommy Robinson was debanked and nobody cared about that because it's him, and nobody wanted to stand up and go, poor old Tommy. But they should have, and some of us did what we could to point out that, well, whatever you may think of him, they're coming for you next. And back then, the government should have stepped in and they could have said, well, we don't particularly like this particular person, but this principle of debanking him is wrong. But they didn't even do that. They didn't even try to make their excuses and try to just speak on the principle of the matter. So you had to realise back then this is a serious situation. But that's interesting what you said about the post office. I did not know that. But that's a very valuable thing, which has a very, very valuable thing which has been destroyed as a consequence of government policy. And will they bring something like that back? As
it shows you that.
Yeah.
It shows you it's deliberate, Alistair, if you think about it, doesn't it? It just shows you it's deliberate. But Nigel certainly has done a good job. And, I had to smile. One of the condescending, there was a 40-page report made about him. And I could debunk everything that was in that. Debunk everything that was in that report. But one of the condescending things that was said was, he's very polite when he comes into the bank. And I said, when I wrote to quite. And I said, I can imagine, first of all, Nigel deals with everybody from royalty to the lowliest low-paid worker in the country. And he gives everybody, Alistair, I'll say this about him, he gives everybody an equal amount of his time. He doesn't look beyond the person he's talking to, etc. So he's wonderful in that respect. But I said, I'm sure your staff would be made up if Nigel had come into the bank. Why wouldn't he be polite? It was just the way it was said.
Yes.
Infuriated me.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And creepy, the fact that they were looking into everything that he's done. And I was reading something in I think it was the Sunday Telegraph last week, Simon Heffer saying that who's a journalist, he got a phone call from his financial advisor saying that people are sniffing about you, Simon, because apparently you're friends with Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage is a politically, what do they call it? They've got this phrase, a PEP.
Politically exposed person.
Politically exposed person.
A PEP.
And so Simon Heffer's financial advisor was worried about this, thinking that you might be next, Heffer. So that is, so they're actually friends of friends, they're looking at who's his friend and what's his friend doing. Well, let me explain
to you. I've got no love of the Conservative, I've got no love of politicians at all. And Lord Lawson has just, Nigel Lawson, the ex-old Chancellor, has just died. But he had a granddaughter who, is wonderful girl, but she has Down syndrome, and she was even denied. She's in a little business in Brighton. I think she's probably still doing it from what I remember, running a cafe for disabled people, and everybody loves her and the people there with Down. She was denied a bank account because she was connected with Lord Dawson, which is granddaughter, for God's sake. The banks have got an awful lot to answer for, and this wokeness. I did say to the CEO before he left, the hornet's nest you've opened will never again be closed. And like God, let's throw the moneylenders out of the temple. That's my take on it, Alistair. Get them all gone.
Yes, and that's been a long time coming, and let's hope that will actually come about during our lifetimes, because it's as if it's coming to a head now, and we are in the right, and more people are waking up. So I see it positive, and I think it's a positive thing. I think it's what was intended, as it were, that Nigel has to face this battle, and the rest of us can support him in it.
Yeah, the 15-minute cities are being thrown out all over. Canterbury's thrown them out. Thetford in Norfolk, Glastonbury has thrown them out. So there's all sorts of things, Alistair, now where the pushback is coming. So these people, these globalists from all these shady organisations think they can win. Well, they can all take a hike, including the bankers.
Absolutely.
I did say bankers, didn't I?
That's what it sounded like to me. But
thank you
fantastic, fantastic for this. I'm so glad to hear that you've got another 2 of your conferences, the Great Resist conferences, lined up. So we'll stay in touch about that, and we'll make sure to give you as much publicity around them as possible. The next one on the 2nd of September. So if somebody wanted to go to the one on the 2nd of September, they go to thegreatresist.net perhaps to buy tickets.
We're just sorting that out. There will be, if you go to the Great Resist in the next couple of days, just give us a couple of days, Alistair, and whether we're going to do it ourselves or whether it's going out to a company, that will be up tomorrow. Okay, right. So give us a couple of days on that, but then we're all there. Okay.
Good stuff. Well, we'll speak again, Liz. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and always a very passionate voice for truth, and lots of interesting material as well that you've got to share with us. So we look forward to having you back on.
I look forward to coming. Thank you very much.
Good night. Fantastic. That was the great Liz Phillips of the Great Resist Conference. Stuart says, thanks, Liz. Stuart had a good wee joke actually up here earlier that I didn't get a chance to bring up. He goes, students are never woke before noon. Catherine says, thanks, Liz, I concur. And Debbie says, great chat again, Liz. Wasn't it just? Went very quickly. Christopher says, thank you, Liz. And Derek says, we need more people like Liz Phillips. Round of applause. Don't we just? Good. Now, let's see. We had our competition. Thank you, Liz, says TC. We had our competition. Now, do we have a winner? Let's see. It was for our... We have a winner. It was for our wallets, Union Jack wallets, credit card wallets. And I asked the question, on this day, Alexander Graham Bell passed away back in 1922, and he was famous for inventing which household item? And the answer, of course, was the telephone. And the winner is Paul Hadlow. Paul, well done, sir. We'll get that off to you tomorrow. A great supporter of our organisation is Paul. Nice to see him winning again. Good, good. Okay. Well, we're going to be back next Wednesday. We'll have a guest next Wednesday. It's going to be the great Ash, that Preston journalist. He's booked in for next Wednesday. Folks, if you have not watched us before, we're on virtually every Wednesday night between 7 and 8 p.m. and we almost always have a guest these days as well, always a very interesting person. And if you like the work that we do, please, of course, drop a quick donation to aforceforgood.uk/donate to. And if you like our t-shirts, you can get them also at our shop, which is aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. There's a link on that page which will take you to our Teespring store. There's a link on this page for our Teespring store where you can get to get that, you can get the wee books as well. Fantastic. Okay, folks, we'll see you next week. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.